Hey everybody, welcome to the RC Air Experience. We have a very special guest today. We have the pleasure of having Terence, also known as RC Cad 2VR on the channel or on the podcast. We're going to link to his stuff down below in the video comments. I did a little bit of research on Terence. Welcome, first of all, Terence. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. You have 122,000 Instagram followers. That seems to be your dominant platform. YouTube, 26,300 subs. You seem a little bit less active on YouTube. I think when we first met, I can't remember exactly where your stats were at, but it was a couple of years ago that we first met. Well, first chatted. We never really met other than talking over technology.
I think it was about a year ago.
Yeah, something like that. So Terence is working on some amazing projects. You've been working on this project for quite a while now, and I know there's so much work involved. Last time we chatted, I was overwhelmed with the amount of work you're putting into this thing, and it is outstanding. So welcome to the podcast.
Welcome.
Thank
you.
Hey,
John, one thing. What episode are we on?
I have no idea. 18 or something like that.
You got it right.
I forgot to ask you, so I didn't bother putting that in there. So
normally you go episode and you look to the sky and try to remember. So I wanted to see if I could throw you off. But yeah, you got it right. Episode 18.
Awesome. Good.
Thanks, everybody. Welcome, Terence.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me on. I'm really excited to talk all things airplanes.
Yeah. I think I started following you in the beginning of your project. I don't know, how long have you been on social doing this now?
So I think I am pushing about the third year from where I was kind of dabbling and getting started to it morphing into a giant monster.
Yeah, things have gotten a lot more serious for you on this.
A lot more serious, a lot more complicated. It's a lot more. In some ways, it's kind of surprised me of how big the undertaking is. And it wasn't what I initially set out to do. It was during the pandemic, basically, where what I was doing basically came to a grinding halt, and I'm sitting at home wondering, what am I going to do now? And I've always been in aviation and building and modeling since I was just a little kid. And so I thought, let me see if I can design something. And I started teaching myself Fusion 360, and that's just kind of how it started. And I didn't think anything of it and started putting it on Instagram, and people just started being attracted to it. And so that's really how it kind of all kicked off.
Mm-hmm. That's so cool. For people that don't know, what's the project that you've been working on for X number of years now?
So the project is basically turning into a project / product. When I started working on the L-1011, which was the very last passenger airliner that Lockheed Martin put out before they decided to get out of it, because it ended up costing them a lot of money to get that plane out. There were some issues with Rolls-Royce, which delayed it. And then you had the MD-11, or back then, it wasn't the MD thing. I think it was the DC-10, which was also the tri-jet. And then the FAA changed the regulations around being able to cross oceans, where you had to have more than 2 engines in order to do that. And then the FAA introduced ETOPS. And that was right around the same time that the L-1011 came out. And so before that, if you wanted to fly transcontinental, you had to fly on 4-engine aircraft like 747 and so on and so forth. And so when that changed, basically the market fell out from Lockheed, and they kind of got out of it. And so I remember my first flight on the L-1011, and that's kind of what propelled me to want to do this plane, is because it is, of all the airliners, it's probably my favorite that was ever created, because it was so unique, so different. It was cutting edge for its time. It had the very first auto land system on it. And then just the design, you can't mistake it for any other airplane. The design is truly unique. And so I was like, I think I'm going to do the L-1011. And as I started sharing it online, I started getting questions about like, can I download the files? Are you going to make the files available? Can I get this as a kit? Will you build me one? And that's where it kind of started morphing. And I was like, well, what if I did kind of go down that route? What would it be? And so then I kind of shifted how I was pushing it, and the excitement around it just started to build. And I thought, the pandemic kind of had this effect on a lot of people, and it affected me in a way that it ended up being a completely different, basically a career change is what it boiled down to be.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Awesome.
You answered one of my questions, because one of my questions was, well, actually, you got into one of my questions, then you answered the other question inadvertently, which was how you got to picking that plane. It's always important, right? Everybody always has a story about how they fell in love with a specific car, plane model, and it's usually, I got to ride on it, or I saw it once and I was like, wow, it's amazing. So that's pretty cool.
Have any of you guys ever flown in an L-1011?
No.
So I can tell you why this plane just kind of stuck out for me. So it actually ended up being an accident. I was going to Orlando, Florida, to meet family for Disney, and I missed my flight, and I ended up getting bumped to a different flight, and it was the L-1011. And I remember getting on it thinking, this thing is kind of old, because this was Delta Airlines, and they were starting to phase them out at that point, but it was still active at that time between Atlanta and Orlando. They were still using it for that route. And I remember sitting down, and there was a couple things about it. First of all, I noticed, I was like, this is an older plane, because it kind of had an older motif in it. And then it was very large inside. The way that they did the overhead bins and stuff made it much more spacious looking compared to what we see today in most aircraft, especially wide bodies. But when you hear the engine start, you kind of realize immediately this is a different plane. It sounds different. And then I remember when we started going down the runway, you could just feel the weight of the plane. It feels like this big, sturdy, lumbering aircraft just kind of pushing down the runway. Yeah. And it was that whole experience, and that all of it from that point on is how I just fell in love with that plane. It was
wild.
Yeah, it was like an experience like I've never had on any other plane. Maybe the 747, but the L-1011 had a very specific feel to it, which makes it stand out in my memory so vividly.
Wow.
So that when you flew in that plane, I'm assuming you might know the answer to this, but did that plane have the Rolls-Royce engines?
Oh yeah,
because you mentioned so that was the standard for that aircraft.
Yep, and they and if you talk to anybody that flew the L-1011 or had flown in the L-1011 or a pilot that used to fly the plane, one of the things they always talk about is the engines. Because they really did have a very distinct sound. You could hear it and you knew exactly what plane it was.
Yeah. Wow, that's a cool story. How old? Like how long ago was that? How old were you when that?
So that was in the late 90s. I want to say it was like 98 and 99, somewhere around that time period. So that put me in my early 20s.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So you touched on it briefly. You said you did a career change. You also touched on how you started learning, which I find that amazing. Anybody who can just all of a sudden start teaching themselves Fusion 360 and then design a kit from it. And then, you know what I mean? Like, so I immediately thought you did something that dealt with that because of where you are with this whole thing, right? Like you're pretty advanced for somebody who taught themselves how to use Fusion 360 and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's something I do quite often.
What did you do? What was your career before? Because I was curious about that. Normally, like Dag, we were talking about Dag earlier, or Damon. He's like a lighting supervisor for sets and stages and stuff like that. Like it's completely different from what he does with the aircraft stuff. And it seems like I guess that's similar with you, right? You weren't an aerospace part of this, or you were?
Nope, I had nothing to do with aerospace whatsoever. I was an engineer. I was a software engineer. So I developed software mainly in the web world. I mean, I did billing systems for billing companies, kiosk software, which I can't mention the company, but if you go to Walmart, some of those kiosks that you have there, I was one of the original architects behind designing the software with the touch screen and being able to do measurements like blood pressure and vision and stuff like that. And that's the world that I was in professionally. So I basically went into startup companies and would design their entire systems and their front end systems.
Very cool. So are you doing this full time now?
RC Cad now is full time. Yeah,
cool.
This is there's no other way to do what I'm doing unless it's full time.
No, I can see that. And you moved studios. I saw you did a studio upgrade not too long ago, right?
Yeah.
So that's cool. How's the new studio working out?
This studio is much better, much better. The place that I was in before, I really liked it. It was actually the exact same square footage of what I have right now.
Okay.
The problem was it was in a building. It was an old warehouse building. It was really cool, very loft style. But I had a hair salon that was above me, and they always had dogs and they were up late, and shooting video became a nightmare. And there were some other challenges that I was like, this isn't going to work. I need to be in another place. And plus being able to load in and out, I needed a better loading access. So in this facility, I've got a big 12-foot bay door where I can load machinery in and materials and back my truck into to be able to offload and stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. That's very, very cool.
Yeah.
So you answered why you picked this plane. So other than the software stuff, I mean, is this your first full on kit that you're designing and building?
Yeah. So I built planes in the past. I mean, I remember being a little kid, and I don't know how my parents put up with this. When I think back to that, I don't know how they put up with this. So I spent my teenage years in Arizona, and my parents, their house had basically a big square lawn in the back, and it was surrounded by flowers all around and planters and stuff like that. But the center was basically a big plot of just grass. Nice. And yes, grass in Arizona, they watered every single day to keep it green. But I would build planes out of cardboard and paperboard and all kinds of stuff, and put them on a string and spin in circles for hours in the yard, where it would be like just this big patch of dirt in the middle. And I, looking back at it now, I'm like, God, how do my parents put up with me with that stuff? But they let me do my thing. So I can remember just all the way back that far, building planes. And then even before that, buying plane trading cards and looking at all the different planes and the different liveries from the different airlines around the world. So yeah, it's just been kind of baked in for as long as I can remember.
Yeah. And now you're doing your passion as you're living, which is awesome. I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
That seems really cool.
Have you been an RC pilot since you were young?
So I have very little RC experience. I have very little. I'm much more interested in the building side. Okay. So a lot of people, they just want to fly. Some people just want to build. Some people do both. Right. I'm definitely on the build side. So yeah, that's just kind of how I'm geared. Plus I'm kind of motivated by projects. So once the plane is built, I'm ready to move on to the next one.
Yeah.
And so, and after the L1011, I've already got the next one picked out. That's going to be the next one, which is going to be a little bit more ambitious and a little larger.
Are you allowed to talk? I was going to ask you that. Are you allowed to talk? That was literally one of my questions is, where do you go when you're done with this plane? Is there a next project, and what is it?
Oh, yeah, it is, and I'm not telling.
You're not letting it out. No cat out of the bag. I appreciate that. That's okay. But it's good to know that you're going to go on with another kit, and that's good news.
What's the current waiting list for I guess for the I know you offer different options. So what's the waiting list for everything?
So it's an anxiety-inducing number.
Yeah, I bet.
It's getting close to 300 reservations.
Wow.
Holy cow.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thanks. So yeah, there's
exciting and stressful, I can imagine.
it is, and that's part of why this is taking so long. And it's you know, and that was something that I was hoping that we could get into, is like the amount of kits and the amount of time that it takes and why it's taking so long. It's very difficult in social media to convey the complexity that's involved with developing the plane, right? Mm-hmm. There are other YouTubers who build planes, and you think, okay, it took them 1 month, 6 months, a year or so. It shouldn't take much longer than that. But there's a really big difference between building something for yourself, where if something doesn't fit right, or you don't like something, where you can just change it, cut it out, make another piece, and move on from there. Right. With what I'm doing, it's different, because I have to not only design it, I have to document the entire process. Every single part has to be accounted for. Sourcing materials, knowing how much material is involved. Like a good example is the primary frame is made out of Baltic birch. And when the conflict in Eastern Europe broke out, what ended up happening was supply chains locked down. And in this area, Baltic birch became very expensive, and then it became impossible to find. And so that meant, okay, now I need to find another material that can replace it. That is also because I'm using 3mm birch, which I know there's been a lot of criticism about that. I hear all the time, weight, weight as in like how much it weighs.
Right.
So I hear the criticisms, but the other part is developing a kit. I have to think about, okay, how is somebody going to assemble this? For me, I know how this goes together, but when it's done, like say for instance, if you watched any of the videos, like the last video that I think I posted a year ago was of the empennage section, for instance. That alone took months and months and months to design. And then once it was designed and all the parts were made, assembling it is very different than the theory of designing it in CAD, right? In CAD, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. You just do this and put this in this order. But you start building it, and then all of a sudden you realize, I can't access that screw, or I can't get my hand into this position, or this part won't merge with this one because this one is now in the way.
Right. Yeah.
And so what ends up happening is now I've got the documentation, the manual, because all these parts, even I can't tell what part goes where. So I have to create a manual to tell me as well as to where these things go. So I've created the documentation, I've created all of the machine files, the laser cut files and everything. And now all of a sudden parts won't go together because of a sequencing issue. And so now you go into a redesign, which now has a cascade effect, right? Which is you had everything, and now because you have to make these 3 changes, all of your images in the manual are no longer good. The cut files for the laser are no longer good. The hardware usage, the 3D print files, all of those go out the window, and you have to rewind and start all over again.
Wow.
And so this is part of why this takes so long. And like I said, it's very difficult to explain that. And I do hear the criticisms, and I see the comments, and you know how people blast you in comments. Like, he doesn't know what he's doing. This is taking too long. It's never going to get done. But it's just the complexity of it. It's just the nature of what it is. And if you've ever done product development, you know how complex that is to bring a product to market, especially something as complex as this.
Yeah, this is real deal. It's not like you're designing a mold and doing injection molds or something. Like, you're doing piece by piece, part by part.
Correct.
I could get that. I could definitely get. Are you getting a lot of pushback at this point from people who have, I guess, pre-ordered or?
No, for the most part, people that have put in their reservations, everyone has been really, really patient, which I'm very, very happy about. And for anybody that's watching that is on the list, know that part of also this taking so long is because I don't want to put out a product that's going to fail. Right?
Yes.
So there's the pressure of that as well. So I want to make sure that when this becomes available, when someone gets it and they open the box and they start putting it together. The parts go together the way they're supposed to. Things fit. It's easy. It's fun. The entire process is as seamless as it possibly can be. And that's really what I'm trying to get done with this kit. Because if I can accomplish what I'm setting out to do and people love building this, you know, in some regards, I don't know if it brings kit building back, but I think it'll encourage people to say, maybe I can do that, because a lot of people are kind of dropping out of it thinking it's too expensive, or which it is expensive, but or it's too complicated, or I don't know how to do it, or I can't build. But if you can do something that kind of goes together, you know, bit by bit, piece by piece, and there's a nice manual and an instruction manual, and everything is there for you to be able to do. I hope that this opens the door for more people to kind of get back into it, especially younger people. You know, when you're talking about STEM and education and that cohort, just kind of saying, yes, you can do it, and just get your hands into it and start building and learning how these things work.
Right. Yeah. You have your name on it as well, right? So you want it to be successful. You want it to be one of those top tier kits. It's got your name on it. Mm-hmm. And you want it to lead to another kit, right? So if you put out something that isn't great, people are not going to like it. You're going to get trashed on social media, and then kit number 2 doesn't happen.
Yep.
So there's a lot riding on you making this perfect. And I understand that. I 100% get that.
Another part of it is the trap of perfection, because you just used the word perfect. That's another trap, right? Right. Figuring out when is good enough, right? That's another challenge as well.
That's a hard balance. That's a very hard balance.
So for me, what I usually do is there are a lot of parts where I'm like, I could redesign that, but right now it works. It does what it's supposed to do. Don't mess around with it. Just leave it as is. It works, right? Even though the temptation is there, is like, oh, I can change that or tweak this. And, you know, it's just kind of saying, Terence, leave it alone.
Yeah, I get that.
Now, I'll say this, not obviously not having any experience with your kit yet, but I think a great example is BVM, Bob Violet Models. You know, you look back at, I've got 2 in the shop right now, actually 2 behind me there. Mm-hmm. You know, as long as you follow those instructions that they gave you, you ended up with a pretty darn good model. And the one thing that they did really well too is they had the addendums posted on their webpage and would go out to customers and everything, which kind of I think would work well for those things that maybe you're thinking about redesigning, or maybe your first 10 kits go out and you think, wow, this could be a better thing to do in this area. So you send out an addendum and say, okay, let's glue this little 1/4-inch piece of plywood in this spot, and it solves the world's problems, right?
Right.
So yeah, I think there's a good balance there, but there's not a lot of companies that have achieved what these guys have and what you're doing as well too. I mean, to put a product out where you follow the manual, follow the plans, and you end up with a good flying plane. It's awesome. It's great to see.
And there's a reason for that, because when I started this, I couldn't figure out why there weren't more companies doing it.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the importers, right, that bring things in from overseas, and it's not that they're bad, right? Mm-hmm. They do what they do, and people get a lot of enjoyment out of it. But with them and with me, it's more about the craftsmanship, right? It's more about the hands-on, the tactile nature of it, and the feeling of accomplishment of, you know, not only did I put my resources into this and my time, but it's also, you know, at the end of the day, when you see this thing like the L1011, I mean, it's almost got a 9-foot wingspan. And I know that's in by some measures that's considered small, by others it's considered large, but still for a builder to build something that's got a 9-foot wingspan, you know, and you're seeing it in front of you and it's complete and it's ready to go. I mean, any builder that builds anything, whether it's cabinets or houses or whatever it is, there's that feeling of, I did that and I can't believe I did that at the same time.
Yeah, for sure.
But see, you're almost at a disadvantage when compared to those guys that did it back in the day, because not only are you're a one-man show, right? Not only are you working on the kit and doing that part of it, but you are also doing the social media part of it, which is time consuming in its own part, right? So it's like your back's against the wall on both parts because you got to get the content out so people are aware and following the progress of the kit, and you got to work on the kit. It's like, you're a one-man show. It's a lot of work. So
yeah, and I'm working on changing that as soon as. So I'm now in the process of building airframe number 2 and number 3. So what you guys have seen is basically a construction model. That model is not going to fly. There were too many problems and issues and like fit problems that didn't work with that one. So that one basically is a construction model that allows me now to test and do different things with it and make the adjustments that I need to make. And so with regard to social media, so just to give you an idea of how time consuming the videos are, the last build video, which was the empennage video, and that's why another video hasn't been produced, is because of the amount of time that it took. Is there was over 60 hours worth of footage just to build that part, and the build time was roughly 4 to 5 weeks of time. Now, the build time of it, the actual building of it, it doesn't take anywhere near that amount of time. What takes the time is setting up the camera for every shot, every angle. And there are certain things, like when I'm working on a certain part, I want to have an establishment shot, right? So you can kind of see in the big picture of what it is that I'm working on, but then I'm working on something that's really small. So now I need you to get in close, right? And so that's changing the camera angle and then repeating what I just did and then reviewing the video and then saying, oops, my hand was in the way. You couldn't see that right there. Now I got to reshoot that again, right? So you do that and then you end up with 60 hours of footage. And then that video took me, if I remember correctly, it was done over 2 weeks. But I would say it was probably 8 or 9 days of easily 10 to 12-hour days, nonstop. Editing and going through all that video to put that together. And Jonathan, you and I got to have a conversation about it, I think, when we talked the first time. And I was telling you about I changed tack in the style of the video. So the previous videos, they move slower, right? And I noticed, because you see the analytics on YouTube, and I could see just the drop off. And I was like, okay, this is not what I was going after. And anybody that does YouTube, you spend hours and hours and hours watching YouTube videos of, how to do the algorithm, right? And so I was like, okay, let me change strategies here and let me do something very different. And so that third video is very different from the others. It moves really, really fast. There is a cut every 2 to 3 seconds. It's several hundred, almost 1,000 cuts, I think, in that video that moves through really fast. And the thing is it took off. It worked, right? And so now it's because I'm working on an entirely new build series to kind of restart YouTube again. I'm going to use an entirely different strategy, which I'm really excited about. That I've been working a lot on getting that going. But yeah, so going back to the amount of time that it takes, it's the editing, and then it's like going through all the photos and figuring out, okay, now I want to do something for Instagram, and I want to post photos and I want to post video, right? I don't know. Did you guys by any chance see the last post that I had on Instagram regarding the 787 landing gear?
Sure did.
I was actually going to ask you about that. So I have the ability to hold on 1 second. I'll do this.
Yeah, he'll bring it up.
Okay.
Yes, that was darn cool. I watched the video on how you put it, obviously the snippets of how you put it together.
Yep, that's the one.
Now this was for a commission, right?
Yeah, so it is a large global consultancy that reached out to me, and they were kind of in a rush. And they were basically introducing at the Farnborough International Air Show that I think just wrapped up this weekend. They wanted to introduce their new software for the Apple Vision Pro. And what they wanted to do was show how their company can build software for maintenance and training in the aerospace industry, and they're really trying to make a push to get into aerospace. They're in other sectors, but they're trying to move over into this. And so they reached out to me and was like, "Hey, we saw that you do 3D printed landing gear. Can you do one for us?" And it was interesting because, I'm working on landing gear that's, this size, right? So this is the size that I'm thinking. So this is what I'm thinking. I'm like, oh, they want me to do something little. And then when they started describing it to me, I was like, oh,
this thing's huge.
This thing's a little bit bigger than what I thought it was going to be. And so I said, sure, let's do it. So I wrote up a statement of work, sent it to them, got the requirements, and got started on the project. And then it just, that project almost broke me. And I say that in all seriousness because the project was fairly straightforward, right? You would think it's 3D printing, so on and so forth. But in order because it needed to be accurate to the 787, right? So I got a mesh model, and for anyone that does CAD, I'll if you know what it is, bear with me here for a second, because I want to make sure that people that don't understand this, a mesh model is basically scaffolding. It's the stuff that they use. Like if you watch the making of any Marvel movie or anything like that, they're on a green screen and then they create these meshes and then they put textures on it. And then all of a sudden it looks like a building or a car or something is there. But it doesn't, there's no physical data there, right? Well, I'm in manufacturing. So when you're talking about manufacturing, you need models that actually have mass to them, right? And so I had to convert this model, this mesh model, all the parts, and convert them manually into solid models in Fusion 360.
Oh my gosh.
And so that part I didn't calculate, right? Because I figured I was going to get the model ready to go, and I just had to make some tweaks to it in order to build it, work on some tolerances, because it has the wheels actually function, the pistons move, the strut actuates, and the torque links and stuff like that. All of that stuff functions. So I figured that's what it was going to be. But then it ended up, no, I have to do a full conversion. So I ate up 7 days working 10-hour days nonstop doing the conversion alone.
Wow.
which then ate up the time for production. And so here I am now, and I'm like, okay, I've got 5 days to get this done, and I've got 8 days worth of printing.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
And so I bought another machine, had it rushed to cut that time. And so I'm just going through this entire process. And then, you do the presentation, and then that's when changes show up, right? It's like, oh, well, because of something that we had in the AR, that doesn't really work right. We need to make a change here. And when you introduce that kind of stuff, now you're back in CAD. Now you're remaking parts, and then you're painting, you're priming, you're redoing the whole thing. And so like right now you can see the strut, the big white strut column. So that took 17 hours to print, and it's done in parts, right? But once it was done, it's not only is it not ready for paint, it's all made out of carbon fiber nylon. That's my favorite material to print with. It's so reliable. It's strong. It's it has a high temperature tolerance. It's chemical resistant. So that's typically my go-to filament that I like to use.
It's not an easy filament to print with, though, right? There's a lot of considerations with bed warping and stuff like that, right? Am I wrong? Or
yes, and I learned some hard lessons early on, but I've got everything dialed in now to where I know how to model for it. I know how to set up for it. So usually I end up never having failed prints at this point. Thank you.
And what does that print at? 300?
Yes, 300. Yeah, 300 with the bed. So it's I use two different filaments. I use PA12 CF and PA6 CF.
Okay.
PA12 I usually put a higher bed temperature, usually at 100 C. The PA6 is a little bit more forgiving, so that one's usually at 60 C.
Okay, so like a PLA basically at the 60 C, or like a typical filament.
Yeah, but what I do before I start a print is I run the bed and heat the chamber before I start.
Okay.
So that's one thing that I always do instead of allowing it to start cold. Not that it's ever caused a problem, but every now and then, if you don't have like a glue or some sort of a surface modifier, if you
Right.
don't have that, typically you might get a little bit of warping.
Right. What do you like for a surface modifier? What are you using?
So I use usually just a regular glue stick. That's kind of
Okay.
my go-to.
Okay. Yeah, I know everybody has their own, some people like that magic glue stuff and stuff like that. What printer are you using?
So interesting story. So I started out with the Raise 3D printers.
Wow.
That's where
Okay.
I started, and they're good printers. But then Bamboo reached out and they said, "Hey, we've got this new printer. We want to get some feedback from you." And so I said, "Sure." And I was running the Bamboo and the Raise 3D in tandem, right? And then it was just one of those things where the Bamboo was just hands down outperforming in every measure.
Even over a commercial machine like the Raise? I mean, that's a pretty high end machine, right? Dollar wise, they're expensive.
Oh yeah. I think at the time, I spent $5,000 on it.
I was going to say that's a real deal printer.
Yeah, and so I found myself using the Bamboo more and more and more. Now, because I'm using engineering level kind of materials, they don't print as fast as PLA.
Right.
But I mean, I was seeing, 15, 20% improvement in print time over the Raise, because I had the Pro 2 over that one. And I was never having failed prints. They
Wow.
just always worked every single time. Whereas with the Raise 3D, I would have failed prints on the regular. To the point.
Sorry, go ahead.
To the point where it was just like, can I continue using this realistically when I get into production?
Right.
And so I kept it for a while and still used it, but it required more work. So I ended up offloading that, and now I'm building a fleet of the Bamboo printers. And rumor has it they're getting ready to introduce a larger format printer, and I can't wait to get my hands on that because that'll allow me to do. Because the parts that I do, a lot of them are really large. It would simplify it where I don't have to do smaller parts and then put them together.
So with the Bamboo machine, you're printing, most people who have Bamboo machines are hobbyists who are printing, PLA or PETG. You're printing some pretty abrasive stuff, right? How fast are you going through nozzles, or what'd you do with the nozzle in it?
So the C1, the X1 carbon, that one has a hardened nozzle in it. So that one is equipped to handle abrasive materials.
Okay. And you haven't had to replace the nozzle?
Not a single time. I have literally not had a single problem with any of the Bamboo printers I have. Not a single one. And I'm not trying to like tout Bamboo. I'm just saying this has been my experience.
No, listen, that's impressive with nylon CF, right? Because that's what you said you were printing.
Mm-hmm.
That's impressive.
I'm in the same boat as you, Terence. Like Bamboo reached out to me. I've got an X1 carbon sitting here, and it's hands down my favorite printer. Anybody who asks me which one to go with, that's the one because it just works. Mm-hmm. So love it.
Well, the other thing is because I have to think about production, right?
Of course,
and like this landing gear thing was an interesting kind of test run because I'm running now multiple printers. Because I've got several resin printers as well. So at any one time, I had at least 6 printers running simultaneously.
Wow!
And it's just when it comes to reliability and when you're talking about production, those two things, it just has to be right.
Yeah,
it cannot be wrong. I mean, imagine here's this company that comes to me and they say, we need you to build landing gear. I agree to do it. They pay me to do it. And they've got a hard deadline because they're going to a world-renowned air show where CEOs from Airbus and Boeing and GE and everybody who's anybody is going there. The pressure is really, really high. And you just can't be in that situation and have printers fail. You just can't, right?
No.
And so it was just flawless. So those are the printers that I use. And the other thing, and most people that use it as a hobbyist probably don't know, but the slicer is also very good. The way that they set up where you can do projects. So for instance, when I'm working on flaps for the L1011, I can set up a flaps project and nothing but the flaps are in that project and they're in their own file. And any changes, I can immediately just save it out of Fusion 360, go in there, right click and say reload, and it pops in the updated version. I don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
It's little things like that, and the fact that I can control all of the printers from my desktop or from my laptop and monitor them from anywhere. I mean, yeah, I can do that with some of the other machines, right? You've got what's the I mean, I'm not going to name names, but there are other production ready machines, and I see no reason to spend $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $10,000 on a machine when a $1,300 machine will do the same thing and give me the same reliability.
Right. Right. No, I agree. I think a lot of those higher end companies, some of them have their place, right? But $5,000 on a machine now is like, it's crazy, especially when you can buy a machine like you said. $1,300 does the same thing. Bamboo
set the entire 3D printing industry on its head.
Agree.
They set it on its head. And the guy that founded it, he came from DJI.
Yes.
And so that explains the ethos and the mentality and how that came to be. They really know what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but then, like I said, the other machines are perfectly fine. There was nothing wrong with the Rays, right? It was a perfectly good machine. There was nothing wrong with it. It just required more work.
Yeah, let me just stop that real quick. And then one of the things I was blown away by, and this is, you were talking about your, how much you have to do with the documentation and everything like that. Your website, and I'm going to share that really quickly as well. Your website's really nice as well. You've put a lot of work into this as well.
Well, you probably can tell from like a lot of the videos that I put out and just the works that I typically will put out. I find that it's really important that to me, presentation means a lot, right? If I'm asking someone to spend $1,000 or $20,000, you have to present it in a way that says you care, you're interested in quality. It's like, it's a full package, right? You don't want to just slop something up there. No one is going to take you seriously. And so, so with the website, I just, I really wanted to put something that people can go to. I need to put more information out there. I want to put more info about like RC and resources and stuff like that.
Well, this is where you kind of had me thinking like you were in aeronautical design and stuff like that prior to all of this, because like you get into like design elements and like aeronautical engineering and stuff like that on your website. It's really cool stuff.
Well, I study that. So even though I'm not trained in that, I study it, and I spend a lot of time going into that to try to understand a lot of these things. Like right there, you can see like, how to read a CIV alpha chart. Like that, I created that when I was choosing the airfoils for the L1011, right? And how do you read a chart like that? What does it mean? So when you're looking at airfoils and you're selecting one, you kind of have to think about that stuff, right? And when you're thinking about stuff like cube square law, which is, a wing that has a 100-foot wingspan can always lift more than, a 10-foot wingspan. And it's because the air molecule size doesn't change. There's literally just physically more air under the wing, right? And so it's learning all of those little things and trying to understand what that is. So like with that chart, I mean, it's showing you at what point, how much airflow and at what degree when it starts creating lift and what angle that lift starts to be generated. And at what point it will stop doing that and fail, right? So when you're talking about an airfoil for a model airplane, you can't use the same airfoil that's on a full-size airliner, right?
Oh, okay.
You need to have an airfoil that performs well at much slower speeds, right? Because a model airplane does not have a V1 or V2 speed of 180 knots or 150 knots, right? It's probably closer to 60 knots. Yeah. So, all of that comes into play. And so that, I spent a lot of time researching that to really understand, what it is, what other airplanes, like model airplanes, what airfoils they use, and then also deciding, okay, I could use this airfoil, but visually it doesn't quite look right when you're trying to be as scale as possible. Right? So it then becomes like, okay, let me look at all of these different airfoils. So like the L1011 has a blended airfoil, right? So the root is a very different airfoil from, maybe I would say by the time it gets to the outboard side of the inboard flaps, it is completely transitioned into a different airfoil, completely different.
And this is on the full scale.
No, this is on the L1011, the model that I'm building.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the trick is I needed to find an airfoil that generates enough lift at these lower speeds.
Oh, okay.
Right. But also can lift enough weight at the same time, because the L1011 is going to be a little bit on the heavy side. So it needs to be able to do that. And so if I use the same airfoil through the entire wing, at the root where it butts up against the side of the fuselage, it just didn't look right. Right? It just was completely wrong, because an airliner has a very, very fat root, right? And it's also very wide. So I don't know how much of that is in frame. I don't know how much you guys can see that. So the inboard part of the flap on this side, that entire area is way, way thicker than the outside of the wing. But it also changes. So hopefully you guys can hear me, but so like from this point on, it gets very, very narrow. But here it's very, very thick and very long and wide. Right. And so it took a long time finding an airfoil that could look as close as the real thing. So when it's up against the fuselage mounted, that it looks right, but it also has enough of the performance characteristics as the airfoil on the outside of the wing.
Right.
Interesting.
Dag was talking about this and breaking it down in layman's terms, because obviously I'm nowhere near as intelligent as you are with this stuff. But he was basically, what you're basically saying is you can't just take a scale airplane and just scale it down in size. You have to design it to be a scale RC airplane, which is basically what you're saying. Correct. You had to take those design elements and make them work so it flew good as an RC airplane.
Yes. You
couldn't just take it and shrink it, because that wouldn't work.
I mean, you could. In theory, you could. I mean, an airfoil is an airfoil, right?
But it's not optimal.
Right. So, like, if I did it to scale and you're at an airfield, you've only got so much space to get off the ground.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And so even with flaps out and everything, an airfoil like that at a scaled down size would require way too much speed just to get off the ground.
Right. Right. And so, I gotta say, you're an impressive guy. I just gotta throw it out there. I mean, just the fact that you've learned all this stuff on your own, without going to school for it. I mean, wow. I mean, you're definitely going to be putting out a really nice kit. I mean, your passion for it, it's just all amazing. And there's so much detail. So, like, another reason I brought up the site too is just like you had plans on one part of this, I believe. I mean, this is just it. I was going through all this, and I was just like, "This is crazy to me." I'm always blown away by people who can do this stuff.
So much
Trust
work.
me, when I look at some of the stuff,
really is.
I kind of think I'm crazy too.
No, but look, you're doing something that hasn't been done, right? And you're not just slapping it together. You're doing it right. Like you're putting love and passion into it, and that's typically where the best products come from, right? Like,
yeah. So like that stuff that you're just scrolling through, those are all original. That like none of that stuff ever made it to build. Like that was all conceptual stuff way back when I was starting.
Wow.
You know, and this is where I get a lot of the accusations of like, it'll never fly. It's too heavy, too much. Like everybody's got an opinion about that.
Of course.
But you know, so much has changed since then. But I leave all that stuff up there so people can kind of see, you know, the history of it, and also for other people to look and say, like, you know, yes, I am learning all this stuff and teaching myself how to do it. But that it's also like, look, I started somewhere, you can start. And it's the crazy thing. And it's, to me, it's like the biggest compliment, and it's humbling. And on many levels, it's kind of like, how does this even happen? Where university students reach out to me and they're thanking me because I helped them through my tutorials and the works that I show. It helped them understand certain concepts, or they got ideas that they didn't think of before that got them through a project or get their finals done. I've had people that changed their majors, that were in school, change their majors because of the work that I was putting out, because at least the way that I interpreted what was being told is the way that I was presenting it made it feel accessible.
It's just it's amazing. I mean,
it is very cool.
Yeah.
So Terence, this may be a hard question to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyways. What do you have kind of an estimated time of completion?
Yes. So like I said, I am getting ready to build airframe 2 and 3.
Yeah.
And those airframe 2 and 3 are separate airframes. One is made out of birch and the other one's made out of poplar. Okay. So the reason why I'm doing that is I need to make sure that both of them can build in case of supply problems, where I can easily switch between them. So I'm building them, but now that I've got all of the parts locked in, except for the nose gear, I'm still trying to finish that. And I've got a CNC machine that is on order that's going to arrive late next month to get some of these parts done, because 3D printing is not going to hold up to some. Even the nylon carbon fiber stuff, when I test it, it holds up a lot. But on a grass field, and you just kind of hit a bump the right way, there's just no way it's going to survive. So I'm getting a CNC machine to be able to machine all those parts to be aluminum. So anyway, back to what
for like the landing gear.
Yeah. So a lot of parts that have been 3D printed are going to end up being aluminum.
What about reaching out to somebody so you can outsource a little bit of that stuff? And like, what about reaching out to like JP or somebody who makes that kind of stuff on a regular basis?
So I've gotten that question before.
Right.
And there's a couple of reasons. The first part is I'm trying to get the kit costs down as much as I can. And part of getting the cost down is being able to own the entire stack of production.
Right.
And then also outsourcing it, there's a lot of the upfront costs, the tooling, everything that's involved with being able to make those parts. So there's a significant amount of investment that's there.
Right.
Also, if anything changes, now I have a change that can't be done in-house. It now has to be redone and sent off. And what if it comes back and it's not quite right because it didn't fit right? It just creates a lot of problems. So I'm doing it the long way and the hard way, and just keeping it in-house, knowing that this gear was designed to be as scale as possible, but as strong as possible and assemble well. And for someone that buys the kit where they also get the experience of building these things, right? Like how does, what do the torque links, how do they connect? Why do they do that? How is this piston there? And how do these things go together? So all of that together kind of says, it's all RC Cad. When you get the kit, it's all RC Cad.
Yeah.
And
I get it.
What's that?
I get it. I get it.
So it's not like a business person would say, don't do that. A business person would say, outsource that.
It's a tough call because you're taking on more of the manufacturing. Like it's a tough call because you're one person and it's more on your plate, your manufacturing.
One person for now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's more to it as well. Landing gear is an interesting thing. It's expensive, especially if you're wanting custom landing gear. It takes a long time. And also having the ability in-house, not only for the L1011, but it also opens up the opportunity for us to offer landing gear product lines.
Right.
So when you're dealing with clients that have specialty landing gear that they need to have made, being able to have the skill in-house and the tools to make that is also part of the business. So when we're talking about RC Cad is not just going to be RC airplanes.
Right.
Not that I don't want it to be, but in order to make it a company that, makes a decent living for me, but also employs other people with benefits and all that other stuff, relying on just RC airplanes, I would have to have an entire library of them in order to make that work. So that leads me into, okay, what other things can I do, right? Can I offer landing gear parts? Can I offer CNC services, like you send a file and it gets made for you, manufactured for you, and keeping it kind of within the hobby, within the community. So for all those reasons, that's kind of why I'm keeping it in-house. And then, of course, there's just the pleasure of learning how to do it and understanding the parts, right? There's that part as well. But like I said, I know it's crazy. I know it makes it take a lot more time. I know people are like, why is he doing that? So it's just my way, I guess.
So back to my question, ETC, estimated time of completion.
So the plan is to have both planes completed before the end of the year.
Okay.
Very cool.
The kits will become available immediately after maiden flight. As soon as it's proven this thing flies and it flies well, kits become available immediately.
What are you covering? I'm sorry.
A combination of things. So I'm doing an experiment right now with pre-made laminate coverings for the wings. So where it's one giant sheet of fiberglass that's already to size and everything that you just glue down onto the surface.
From like a mold.
Wow.
No, actually flat. So it's actually flat.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I'm also looking at doing veneers, and then I'm also looking at doing molded versions as well. So that's part of what I'm trying to figure out right now is how I want to go about doing that part. And then also the other part that I haven't quite nailed down yet is covering for the number 2 engine in the rear, where that part is the geometry around there is really, really complicated.
Yeah.
It's very curvy and it moves in all these different ways. Figuring out how to do that is proving to be a bit of a challenge. So it might end up having to be probably a molded piece that then gets applied up on top of the rest of the skin in order to make that work.
Wow.
Now,
but it's
when
going
we
to be
talked
fiberglass.
when we talked about a year ago-ish, we were discussing different power plants. Your first 2 kits that you're working on here, they're both going to be EDF, I'm assuming?
They are going to be EDF, but as we discussed, we're probably going to come visit you up in Canada and see if you can whip up something for the turbine folks. Because there are actually several reservations for turbines. You'd be surprised at how many people want turbines.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
So-
I mean, in my opinion too, they're just way cooler than those spinning fan things. So
Yeah. So not to turn it a little bit, but when you're talking about turbines, and I don't know if you guys have covered this in the podcast before, but when you're talking about turbines, what do you find is the most intimidating part of it for most people, and what keeps them away from it?
two things I would say to answer your question. The number one thing is probably the cost. I don't think people, if they actually do the research and say, okay, if I buy a nice EDF fan, batteries, et cetera, it's really almost a wash.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of people use cost maybe as an excuse, but they're maybe overwhelmed by the initial cost rather than, you spend, let's say, $2,000 on a turbine, or you can buy an EDF unit for $1,000 and then a couple sets of batteries for $500 each. Well, you're just spreading that cost over a little bit of time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that probably the biggest thing is just lack of knowledge on how to install, set up, run fuel lines, tank systems, all the different intricacies around it.
Mm-hmm.
And I take that for granted because it's just, for me, it's just simple. I do it every day, day in, day out. But for the average person that's just starting, like we have got guys here that are just doing turbines for the first time, the whole thing is overwhelming to them.
It's intimidating. It is, because I've been looking at doing a foam conversion, right? I think we've talked about this, taking a smaller foam plane and putting an EDF in it.
Yeah.
As a starter EDF, as a starter turbine, and it's intimidating.
Yeah.
And to John's point, with an EDF, yes, I can spend good money on an expensive EDF, and then you forgot the ESC, which a good ESC is a couple $100, $500, $600, and then good batteries. But the barrier to entry is a lot lower, right? Mm-hmm. I have to, especially if I've flown EDFs before, you're gonna plug it in, program the ESC if you need to, and you're flying. Like, it's pretty easy, right? So it's definitely intimidating.
Yeah, the reason why I asked that is because I'm thinking about these things, right?
It's a good question. Your design probably has to change too, right? Because
so the design of the plane is actually, the interior is designed to be as flexible as possible. So the only thing that's really different about the L1011 than the standard kind of wing mounts is that I use 3D printed wing mounts, only because I want to stay true to how the spars are in the real aircraft. So the wings are actually very sturdy, and it actually pushes the load all the way through the entire wing from tip to tip through the airframe. And so inside, that's kind of the only restriction, but there's like plenty of space underneath where you can get lines through under that space. But so yeah, for the L1011, it's flexible. I'm not concerned about that.
Even with that tail motor, right? Because the positioning of where I know, John, this is a question for you, I guess. He said he's going to send you the kit and you're going to have to work on this, but the EDF, I'm guessing, is mounted at the front of that, right? And then where are you mounting?
The EDF is actually on the tail end. So it actually sits where the actual turbine was on the L1011.
Right. And that's okay with where you would mount it, because that pipe's all curvy and bendy.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't, I would have put it behind me, but it doesn't fit back here. But yeah, so the S duct, it's actually got a more gradual slope before it actually makes that bend. So you've got about this much space for a turbine in there.
That would work in there, Tom? You could put a turbine in there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
I don't know. That's why it's a good question for me.
Yeah. So the for all places, it's designed to hold up to a 22 diameter is what it's able to hold for all three positions.
Okay.
So I'm designing it to where anyone that is building it can have their choice of how they want to configure it, right? Some people want probably one turbine and they're going to put it in the back, and then the wing mounts are just decorative at that point, right?
Yeah.
Others might want to use just the under wing and not put anything in the rear. And some people who are diehard L1011 people want all three working.
Yeah.
And so it's designed to be able to accommodate that. So the mounts inside, I tried to provide as much space as possible to allow for that flexibility.
Wow.
Very cool.
3 turbines, I think it'd be a rocket ship, right? I mean,
that'd be pretty fun.
yeah.
What's the estimated weight? What do you think it's going to end up coming in at without engines?
So I basically, what I ended up doing was I set it up in different kit variants, and I don't know if you took any time looking at it online, but it's different kit variants. I've got kind of the intro starter kit, and that's for someone who really just likes to make everything, right? They get all the files, they get what they need. The only thing that it comes with is the wood frame, right? Because that's laser cut. But you do your own 3D printing, machining your own parts. If that's your jam, that's what you're going to get, right?
Yeah.
So that's the base kit, and then you've got 2 other kits all the way up to the master kit. The master kit is basically, it has everything. You don't need to buy anything. It has everything with it. And then there are the commission planes. The commission planes are going to run parallel to the others. And so the other kits are easier to produce because it's just making the parts.
Yeah.
Whereas the almost ready fly, an almost ready fly is easily going to take 4 to 6 months to complete.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, and that's why I said, like, as soon as I go into production, that's when I'm going to get people in here, and I'm not going to be the only person at that point. Because it wouldn't be, it's not physically possible for me to accomplish that.
Yeah.
No.
Understandable.
I like your choice of electronics.
I've gotten some heat for that.
That's why I said it. You guys saw John cringe when I said that.
Well, there's actually a story behind that. So Free Sky has offered to provide for the initial build all of the servos and the electronics for it. And so that's why that's there. But that is something that doesn't have to be. So if somebody wants a different package, once it goes online, you'll see what is actually available.
Yeah.
Right. I'm good with the choice.
Yeah.
As you can see by
but you know, Free Sky, they get a bad rap
all day long.
But I mean, I have found that their servos are actually pretty good.
Yeah, the new servo line's really nice, actually.
Yeah, I've not had a problem with them. And then like the very slimline ones, like the ones that are going to run the flaps, for instance. I mean, just the fact that I can get them in these really tight spaces, and for the why am I drawing a blank? For the spoilers, for instance, the fact that I can get the mechanism inside and run lines to be able to run them all at the same time off of one. You know, it's just stuff like that where I'm like, okay, this is cool. And other manufacturers are getting into that space. But for now, they're helping out. So, you know,
right, it works.
Yeah,
absolutely. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So, one last question. How'd you come up with the name for the channel and everything? Actually, I have two questions, because you have a lot of Pinterest on your site. And all the pictures go back to Pinterest. Do you get a lot of clicks from people coming from Pinterest to you?
Yes.
Or is it you do?
So Pinterest drives a significant amount of traffic to the website, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
But Pinterest is it's nothing like Instagram or Twitter X or Threads. It's or LinkedIn. It's not like any of them. It's very, very different. And for lack of a better term, the marinating time is really, really, really long. You can put something up there and it can take months before someone pins it.
Gotcha.
And but then once it starts to kind of go, then there are certain ones that just kind of really go. Like every single morning I wake up and I've got notifications that people have pinned this and pinned that. So, but it took a long time to get there. Yeah. You have to be really, really patient with Pinterest.
I have never really spent a lot of time on Pinterest, got to be honest.
It drives traffic.
Yeah. Huh. John, have you spent time on Pinterest?
No, my wife does all the time.
Sometimes it's like a weird site for me. I don't understand it. I don't know if I'm just old. I just don't get Pinterest, but it's like, It's like, what are you? What is Pinterest?
Well, I mean, it's kind of in the name, right? You're pinning what you're interested in.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's a modern day version of, I guess, a mood board or something. I don't know, or a vision board, right?
I mean, when I first heard of TikTok, I didn't get it either, but now I get it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I got off of TikTok some time ago.
I just post stuff on there because it's easy for me to do it through Opus Clips, so it just does it automatically.
Yeah,
What,
no, I was posting on TikTok for quite some time, and then I just decided to pull the profile. It just wasn't reaching the people that I wanted to reach.
Yeah, totally understandable for sure.
you have to be like 20 and dancing to get a lot of views.
Well, it was interesting because in the beginning, TikTok was actually doing really, really well, and I was seeing other RC people there. I was seeing, because I like watching what people build things, right? It doesn't matter what it is. You can be building a gate for your house. I'm going to be into it, and I was getting a lot of that, and then over time, it just kind of stopped. I was getting less and less and less of it. And then I would go to the people that I was following, and it wasn't that they weren't posting, they were posting. It just wasn't ending up in my feed. And I was looking at their view counts, and all of them, I could see all of the view counts of all of the creative genre was just kind of dropping off. And I was like, I'm putting effort into this, and some of the comments that I'm getting are just, and I'm looking for people that are actually interested and want to engage and have questions or have ideas and want to actually have a conversation. So I kind of just got off of it and said, you know what, focus on YouTube, focus on Instagram, focus on your website, and just kind of stick with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Very
So
cool.
how did you come the name RC Cad 2 VR? What's the deal with the name?
So it's very, very literal. And very literal. And now it's just, I've gotten rid of the 2 VR. So now it's just RC Cad, mainly because RC Cad is going to extend past just airplanes at some point.
Right.
And so the original idea was, I'm in the RC space, I'm starting with CAD, and 2 VR is 2V rotate.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. So
I
the
understand.
VR would V rotate.
You saw the little light bulb go off on my head. There you go.
Yeah. So that's where the name came from. It's a little bit of a mouthful, and I was always just kind of like, But like I said, I was starting this as just kind of like, just do this thing. You're going to do it on the side, and it's not going to really be anything. And then it just kind of stuck.
So when I see VR, I see virtual reality.
Yes.
Like VR. So that's why I was like, well, yeah, I don't see it going from CAD to virtual reality. Is it going to in the future? I don't get it, but I get it now.
Yep. Nope. V rotate.
Terence, thanks for coming on. I think
thank you.
We definitely want to have you back on.
I'd love to be back
in a couple of months towards your your end of the year kind of date and check in with you and see how it's going.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, you're very impressive. The progress and what you've done and accomplished by yourself. I mean, it's amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Big thumbs up from me.
Did it work? Got to do it. It didn't do it.
It didn't work.
There it goes! Fireworks!
Check that
fireworks.
Out. You've got the special defects.
It's his phone.
It's a mystery. The Apple just does it. So.
No, I when I got the email where you guys were inviting me, I was like, oh, this is going to be really cool. I was really excited to get the invite. So, and plus,
that's good.
Thinking about it, I was like, I felt like, this is going to be good because people have got so many questions. Yeah. And it's just so hard to answer those questions.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping like I answered all of your questions and questions that people that are watching.
Absolutely.
That I answered their questions.
And it'll be great to follow up and see how you're making out in a couple months.
Yeah, for sure.
It'll be awesome.
Yeah. I'm optimistically hopeful, and I'm hoping I don't run into any more snags because I ran into a lot of them.
Yeah,
I'm sure. John, you got any more questions?
That's it for me.
All right.
Thank you.
Terence,
appreciate it.
Thank you. Yep. Have a good night, everybody.
All right. Thanks.
Have a good night, guys. Take care.
Bye.